What's going on, everybody? And I hope you're enjoying your Hump Day Wednesday so far. This is NYG Jeffy T85 here, and I'm going to talk about some news around a potential player on the New York Mets that could possibly be on the move if the whole Carlos Correa deal goes down as it should as expected. Now, right now, the latest on the whole Carlos Correa situation is that the New York Mets and Correa's representatives, Scott Boras and Correa himself, still believe that a deal between the two sides will get done in the near future, but it is reportedly going to be dramatically different, which could mean the years and the money could be slashed in half. Maybe he gets a 6 or 7 year deal for about $250 million, or maybe he still gets the original length of the deal, but there's some type of incentives added into it, and maybe there's an opt-out or something in the middle of the deal just to make it easier for the team in case that ankle injury that Correa suffered all the way back in his rookie year in 2014 continues to give him issues going forward. But if that ends up becoming the case and Correa ends up signing with the New York Mets, the Mets might be interested in potentially dangling third base / second baseman Eduardo Escobar, whom they signed to with a 2-year, $2 million deal, $10 million per year last year in free agency. Escobar pretty much has been a solid player over his career, and for the New York Mets, it was a tale of two halves of the season. He pretty much it was like a tale of two halves of the season for Eduardo Escobar. Escobar is about 33 years old, and last year for the team, Escobar played in about 136 games overall. He had 495 at-bats with 119 hits. He hit about 240 on the season with 20 home runs and 69 RBIs with 58 runs scored. He also had an on-base percentage of .295 with a slugging percentage of .430 and an OPS of .726. Eduardo Escobar was not good at the beginning of the season. He wasn't. The beginning of the 2022 season, Eduardo Escobar was off to a horrendous start. A lot of people were wondering why this guy was even playing, because he was just striking out way too much. He was not making any contact with the ball onto the play. Eduardo Escobar was an absolute disaster for the first half of the season, but then he really started to pick it up towards the second half of the season, and he actually became one of the better players on the New York Mets moving forward. He, in fact, hit more than half of his home runs in the second half of the season for the New York Mets, and more than his RBIs. And when you look at his total at the end, the average you kind of wish is better. It is 240. But, it's close to his average over his career. But, he did hit 20 home runs and 69 RBIs after he got to a miserable start at the beginning of the season. So, would the Mets be interested in trading Eduardo Escobar? But you have to think about this. Would Eduardo Escobar be interested in being a bench player on this team if you, in fact, make the Correa deal official? Because you figure going into the baseball season, Correa is a Met. Correa is going to be your third baseman. McNeil's going to be your second baseman, Lindor's your shortstop, and Alonso is your first baseman. You got Vogelback as part of your depth. You got Darren Ruff back. So you got some players that are part of the depth on this roster. Would you be interested in keeping Eduardo Escobar as a bench player? Or maybe you trade him away and possibly get some type of young prospect that maybe doesn't have a whole lot of upside, but he's still a guy you could maybe put into the minor leagues and see if you can develop him. That's the question right now the New York Mets have to think about. Because Eduardo Escobar, as good of a second half he has, he is starting to get up there in age. He would pretty much be a guy that would be a luxury on this team, which isn't a terrible thing to have. But he's going to be making $10 million this year to be a bench player. Would he accept a bench role on this team? Maybe come in like a Luis Guillorme, fill it in a couple of different positions for the New York Mets. At second base and third base, if Correa is signed with the team and needs a rest, you put Eduardo Escobar third, as well as the same thing at second. Or would they want to trade Eduardo Escobar because he could open a spot for some of the younger players that they want to bring up from the minor leagues? Because even if Correa's deal goes down, it still seems like the New York Mets want to see what they got in Brett Baty and Ronnie Mauricio and Mark Vientos. They're the young players in the Mets minor league system right now. So it's going to be a very interesting thing for the New York Mets if, in fact, Carlos Correa becomes a Met in the next few days. And it still seems like all the signs are pointing towards Carlos Correa and the New York Mets agreeing to some type of deal to keep him in Queens. After the original deal was almost looking like it was going to fall through, but both sides look determined to try to make it work. It's just really still trying to work out the parameters of the deal going forward. So if you're a New York Mets fan, would you be interested in trading Eduardo Escobar if Carlos Correa officially gets signed by the team? That's what you got to think about. Or if Eduardo Escobar is willing to accept a role on the team as a bench player, coming off the bench and spelling either McNeil or Escobar at second or third, would you keep him around as depth? Because you always need as much depth as you can on this roster. Just like I mentioned before about Carlos Carrasco with the starting pitching staff. Sure, there have been rumors out there that the Mets have been interested in trading Carlos Carrasco, but it does not hurt to have a veteran right-handed pitcher that has had experience and has been a top of the rotation pitcher in the major leagues over his career. It would not hurt to keep him around because you're relying a lot on some older pitchers and inexperienced guys. Same thing with Eduardo Escobar. What happens if Correa gets hurt? Are you going to put your trust in Beatty or Vientos? Or McNeil goes down with an injury? If God forbid either one of those guys get hurt, you have a Luis Guillorme and you have a Eduardo Escobar that come right off the bench, and maybe you won't get the exact same type of production you got before with your starters. You're still not going to be having a massive drop-off like you would if you put in some of the younger players that maybe don't have that type of, experience that an Escobar does. So these are the little things that you have to think about as a New York Mets front office player. And, the general manager, the people in charge. Would you be willing to trade Eduardo Escobar, and what would you get back for him? When he really was a tale of two halves. First half he wasn't good. Second half he was pretty good. He's getting up there in age. Correa signs he doesn't really have a starting position on this team. So would you think about trading him when his value might be at a decent amount? What would you get for him? Or can you try to convince him to potentially stay on in a reserve role for this baseball team and strengthen the depth and the bench on this baseball team going into the 2023 season? Got to think about that. But I just want to make this video on the Eduardo Escobar potentially being traded if, in fact, Carlos Correa does sign his deal with the New York Mets pending the physical. Let me know in the comment section how you think. If you like this video, hit the like button below. Sub up if you haven't already to NYGJeffyT85 for more breaking news, updates, and chatter surrounding the New York Mets. Turn on the bell for notifications on the next video or short that's going to be dropping on the channel surrounding the New York Mets. And you guys let me know in the comment section what you would do with Eduardo Escobar if Carlos Carrasco does in fact sign with the Mets. Would you keep Eduardo Escobar as a bench player, or would you trade him for potential young player that is controllable going into the 2024 season and beyond? Let me know in the comment section, Mets fans, because it's a very interesting discussion that you could have if, in fact, the Mets do sign Eduardo Escobar, or Carlos Carrasco. What is the future of Eduardo Escobar? Thank you very much, everybody. Enjoy your Hump Day Wednesday. Take it easy, everybody, and let's go, New York Mets. All you got to do is you got to believe in those boys from Queens.